The sky over the town of Durnstead always seemed the same shade of dying blue, like old wallpaper in a house nobody loved. Maeve noticed at the moment she crossed the last gas station on Route 12, the one with the crooked sign that buzzed even in daylight. Even when the power was supposedly out, her car hummed beneath her like it knew something she didn't, like it had grown afraid of the road itself. The trees lining the highway began to close in. They were tall and sickly pines, knotted with ivy and dusted with a strange sort of moss that shimmered silver in the breeze. There was no wind, not really, but the moss stirred anyway, as if breathing, as if watching. Maeve shook her head and turned up the radio, but it was all static. Even the CD she tried crackled like a whisper too close to her ear. She turned it off and listened to the tires thrum instead. She had driven nearly 6 hours from her apartment in Holloway, trading city lights and broken neon for the promise of a quiet cabin in the woods. She hadn't been sleeping, not since the dream started, not since her mother died last fall. Her fingers twitching in the bedsheets like she was trying to pluck something from the air before she went. "You'll find it," her mother had said in her last moments, wide eyes fixed on something behind Maeve, something just past the edge of the hospice bed. "It calls to us, always." Maeve hadn't asked what it was. The morphine was strong then, and her mother had said many things, most of which made no sense. But the dreams that followed had a shape. Always the same forest, the same song, the same cabin with its windows like blank eyes. And the sound, that soft, crooning sound beneath everything, like the echo of something long buried. It hadn't stopped in weeks. It hummed in her walls, in her bones. It was why she'd come. The cabin was said to belong to a distant cousin, someone she'd never met, an inheritance no one else wanted, nestled deep in a stretch of woodland long since renamed Whispering Pines. It was supposed to be abandoned, yet there had been letters in her mailbox from it. No return address, just a single phrase on the envelope every time. Come home. And now she was here, or almost here, following the last stretch of road that no longer appeared on her GPS. The trees pressed closer. The air thickened. It was like driving through molasses, each second stretching longer than it should. She checked the clock. It read 4:44. She blinked. Still 4:44. Minutes passed. Still, her phone vibrated in the passenger seat. No signal. No new messages. But the wallpaper had changed. Instead of the photo of her and her brother at the lake last summer, it showed something else. Something pale and bent, standing at the tree lean, a blur in the shape of a person, with antlers. She stared at it too long enough for her tires to jolt over something that shouldn't have been in the road. She braked hard. The car skidded slightly, settling into the mud of the shoulder. Her heart galloped. She stepped out slowly, gravel crunching under her boots. The air smelled of rotten pine, thick and sweet, like something dying in the underbrush. There was no animal, no debris, just the road, just the sound of it. It was humming, not from the car, not from anything she could see. The road itself sang, a low, gentle note, like a lullaby sung by something with too many teeth. And the moss on the trees began to shimmer again, rhythmic, swaying. She got back in the car. She didn't look in the rear view mirror, not even once. She kept her hands tight on the wheel and her foot on the gas, even though the road felt like it curved when it shouldn't, like the forest wanted her to keep turning inward, spiraling deeper. The trees were taller now, dark enough to blot out the last of the sun. Shadows stretched across the road like arms. When she finally saw the cabin, it was all at once, as though it had been watching her the entire time. It was older than she expected. The windows were dark. The door was ajar. Her mother's voice came back to her in a breathless whisper. "It calls to us, always." Maeve stepped out, gravel under her boots once again. No bird sang. No insects buzzed. There was no wind. But the moss stirred anyway, and the road behind her, empty, endless, continued to hum. The cabin loomed like a tooth in the earth, blackened by time. its boards warped into strange angles that didn't quite meet. It wasn't just neglected, it was wrong. Maeve stood at the edge of the gravel path and looked up at the windows, trying to count how many there were. They changed. She blinked and they changed. First 2 on the second floor, then 3, then 1. The door groaned open a little wider on its rusted hinge, though no wind passed. Maeve crossed the threshold. The smell hit her first, not the sharp tang of mildew or mold, but something deeper, like wet soil left too long in a sealed jar, a scent that clung to the inside of the nose. The light was dim, filtered through thick lace curtains that hadn't been white in decades. She reached for the light switch. It clicked but gave nothing back. Silence pooled in the cabin like water in a sink with a broken drain. She moved forward, her boots creaking against warped floorboards. The entryway opened into a narrow corridor that felt too tight, too tall. There were no photos on the walls, only small, discolored paintings. Forest rendered in blurred oils, black trees rising out of gray fog. In every painting, tucked away in some corner, was a shape, not quite a person. Sometimes it looked like it had antlers. Other times it had none. But the eyes, if they were eyes, were always the same. White, round, watching. She passed a long mirror in a tarnished brass frame. Her reflection wavered for a moment, then grinned. Maeve didn't. The main room had a fireplace and a sagging armchair in the corner. Dust covered everything like snow. The hearth held no ashes, but it smelled faintly of burnt hair. Above it, where a family portrait might have once hung, there was a large canvas smeared entirely in matte black. It absorbed light. She couldn't stop looking at it. There was something inside the black. Not a shape, not exactly. A depth, like standing at the edge of a pit that went down too far. Her phone buzzed. She nearly dropped it. One new notification. No signal. Just a reminder that shouldn't have been there. You're inside now. Don't leave tonight. Maeve's hands trembled. She tried to dismiss it, but the phone locked itself. The screen showed that same warped image from before, a pale figure at the tree line, only now it was closer. Much closer. Its mouth was open. She put the phone down on the mantel. The buzzing didn't stop. It vibrated again and again, rattling against the wood like it wanted her attention. She turned it face down. There was a staircase near the back, leading up into shadow. It was too narrow. The banister was carved with small, repeating marks, circles with lines through them, like crude eyes with lashes. She ran her fingers along them and felt warm. Fresh. The floor above groaned. Maeve froze. Another sound. A soft, dry dragging, like cloth or bare feet on old wood. She backed away. A door in the far wall creaked open slowly, revealing a small kitchen. Yellowed tile. A humming refrigerator that didn't seem plugged in. She stepped inside. There was a note on the counter, weighed down by a fork. Do not answer knocks after midnight. They don't knock twice. Her breath caught. It was written in her mother's handwriting. She turned it over. The back was blank. But the air had changed. Thicker now, pressing around her shoulders like unseen hands. The fridge began to buzz louder, a shrill whine underneath the hum. Then came the voice. Soft, crooning, familiar. Maeve? She spun around. Nothing, just the entryway. The hallway, the half-seen mirror, the paintings. But they were different now. The fog was gone. The trees were clearer. And the shape of the eyes? Closer. She shut the kitchen door and locked it, her back to the grainy wood. It was going to be a long night. A soft knock echoed from the front door. She looked at her watch. 12:01 a.m. The knock didn't come again. Maeve held her breath, straining to hear anything over the thunder of her own heartbeat. The cabin remained still, but not silent. The kind of stillness that hums, charged, taut, listening. The sound under the silence wasn't wind or wood. It was something deeper, like the moan of the earth shifting in its grave. She backed away from the kitchen door, Eyes on the hallway. The walls seemed to lean closer now. Or perhaps the house itself was breathing. She crept to the front door, slow and careful. Each step a prayer not to creak the boards. She reached for the lock, paused. Her fingers hovered above it. A small voice inside, one that sounded just like her mother, whispered, "Don't. It's not for you." Maeve stepped back. The doorknob turned. Just a soft jiggle, then stillness again. She stumbled backward, knocking over a dust-choked umbrella stand. The sound echoed far too loudly in the cabin, like it had bounced off more than just the walls, like something below heard it too, from the ceiling above her. The floor creaked once more, slow footsteps now pacing, back and forth. The old beams groaned as though under the weight of something too tall, too heavy, too wrong. Maeve forced herself to move. She backed into the living room, not taking her eyes from the stairs. The humming returned, not from the road now, but from within the house. A lullaby just beyond comprehension, sung in a language she had never heard, but somehow almost recognized. It came from the fireplace, from the black canvas above it. It had changed. No longer just a void of matte paint. Now it shimmered faintly, like oil slicks on water. She saw the shape again. Tall, gaunt, antlers, or maybe just branches. A face like melted wax. It moved when she moved. A mirror, but not hers. She stared too long. It blinked. Maeve's stomach turned. She tore her gaze away and reached for her phone on the mantel. Gone. In its place, the black canvas flickered. Maeve. She turned toward the voice. Nothing there, but the sound had moved. It was coming from the staircase now. The slow, creaking footsteps had stopped, but something stood at the top, just beyond the bend where the railing disappeared into shadow. A long pause, then another knock. Not at the door this time. At the window. Tap, tap. Maeve spun. The front window by the couch. It was covered in that same lace curtain, but she could see the silhouette behind it. Tall, lean, wrong. It didn't move. She approached slowly, closer, close enough to see breath fogging the glass from the outside. Tap, tap. She pulled back the curtain. There was nothing there. Not just no figure. No woods. No trees. No porch. No world. Just black, like the window looked into a different place entirely. A void. She closed the curtain, her hand shaking. The clock on the wall ticked once. Then again, 12:17 a.m. Another knock, this time from the back of the house. She stood frozen, every nerve ending screaming. It was as though the house had grown eyes, watching her, testing her. She remembered the note. Do not answer knocks after midnight. They don't knock twice. She whispered the words to herself like a spell. The knocking stopped, but the cabin did not go silent. It sighed. Every wall creaked. Every board groaned. The house exhaled, and with that breath came a smell like rust and rotting flowers. Maeve stepped into the hallway, toward the staircase. She needed to see what was upstairs. The hum in the air grew louder with each step. The singing closer. The song, whatever it was, felt familiar now. Not the melody, but the tone, like a memory trapped in amber. A dream she'd had as a child. Come home. The banister was warm again. The eye-like symbols beneath her fingers pulsed faintly, like veins. At the top, the hallway stretched longer than it should. Doors on either side. All closed, except one. The last door on the right was open just a sliver. Enough to see a warm, yellow light flickering within. Candlelight, maybe, or fire. Maeve approached slowly. Every footstep echoed down the hall, as if it were a cavern. The walls here were covered in different paintings. No trees now, only rooms. Rooms that looked like the cabin, but twisted. In each, there was a mirror, and in every mirror, the same shape. Tall, pale, horned. Some paintings showed children staring into the mirrors. Some showed the mirrors staring back. Maeve reached the open door. The light pulsed softly. The floor was wet beneath her feet. She pushed it open. Inside was a nursery. Old, abandoned. Dust motes floated through shafts of light that came from nowhere. A single crib stood in the center, rocking slowly, back and forth. Inside, a bundle of blankets. Maeve stepped forward, drawn by something deep and cold in her chest. The blankets shifted. Something moved underneath. And from the crib, in a voice that was not a child's, not even remotely, came a hoarse whisper. "Welcome back." Maeve's feet refused to move. The voice in the crib was not loud, but it spread through the air like smoke, curling into her ears, her throat, her lungs. She felt it settle in her bones. "Welcome back," it said again, softer now, as if the thing in the crib had waited a long, long time for her return. She took a step closer. The rocking stopped. Silence gathered like a crowd around her. The blanket shifted once more, and she saw fingers, tiny, pale, but long, far too long for a baby. They poked through the folds of cloth like roots worming out of the earth. Their joints bent the wrong way. Maeve's stomach turned. She reached out, hand trembling. A gust of freezing air struck her from behind. The door slammed shut. The sound was final, like a coffin lid falling shut. The light in the room dimmed. The air thickened. And then the crying started. Not a child's cry. Not human. Something ancient. Hungry. The blanket split open. Maeve staggered back as the thing rose up from the crib. Limbs unfolding too fast. Too many. It wore the shape of a child for a moment. Then of something else. Something that flickered between forms like pages in a burning book. A young girl with no eyes. A tall man with a deer's skull. A woman with her mother's voice and her father's missing hands. "You left us here," it said in 1,000 voices. Maeve backed toward the wall, gasping. "Who are you?" The figure stopped shifting. Its body went still, featureless, faceless. But its head turned toward her, and she knew it was smiling. "We are what's left. We are what remembers." The floor groaned beneath her. Then it cracked. Maeve fell. The boards gave way like rotten teeth, splintering apart as she plunged into a choking darkness. No light, no bottom, but the humming followed her. She landed hard. Dirt. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and mildew. She lay on her side, dizzy, tasting iron in her mouth. Somewhere in the dark, water dripped steadily. Her hand sank slightly into ground, soft, damp soil. A basement? No, something older, deeper. She stood, slowly, her breath visible in the cold. Her eyes adjusted to dark, or rather, the dark changed, grew thinner, like fog pulling back just enough to reveal walls made of stone and clay. Etchings covered every inch of them, spirals, circles, more of those crude ice symbols. The hum was louder here, pulsing like a heartbeat behind the walls. Ahead, a narrow tunnel. She had no choice. The air pressed close around her as she moved through the tunnel. The space grew tighter, the walls wet and slick. She touched them, felt grooves worn smooth by countless hands. The floor sloped downward. Then she heard it again, footsteps behind her. Close. She stopped. So, did they? She started walking again. Faster. The footsteps followed. She broke into a run. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, winding in impossible angles. She turned corners that shouldn't have fit, ducked under beams that felt hot to the touch. The hum changed pitch. It wasn't a lullaby now. It was a call. Come home. Come home. Come home. She stumbled into a cavern, wide, circular, lit by hundreds of candles. In the center, a stone altar, and above it, embedded in the wall, was a massive wooden door with no handle. It was etched with more eyes, and in the center, a symbol she didn't recognize, a spiral made of fingers. The humming stopped. A voice spoke, low and clear, from behind the door. One opens, one enters, one stays. Maeve shivered. She stepped toward the altar. On it lay objects, a small brass key, a shard of mirror, and a bundle of red string. There was a whisper in her ear, though no one stood beside her. Choose. She stared at the objects. Her heart pounded. The key gleamed. The mirror shimmered. The string twitched like a vein. She reached out. The cavern trembled. The door began to breathe. The door breathed, and again, deeper this time, as if awakening from a centuries-long slumber. The wood flexed and groaned. Veins of sap glistening red where the spiral of fingers had been carved. It inhaled as though it meant to taste her. Maeve froze. Her hand hovered above the three objects on the altar, the brass key, the shard of mirror, and the bundle of red string. All pulsed faintly, as if beating in time with the door's breath. Again, the whisper, this time louder, sharper. Choose. Choose or be chosen. The key seemed safe, obvious, a way out. She reached for it, but the mirror twitched, just slightly. She looked down. In its surface, a reflection that was not hers. A woman, older, hair wild, eyes hollowed by time, standing where she stood, reaching where she reached. And behind her, in the mirror's world, the walls bled. From the ceiling hung things that should not hang. She snatched her hand back. The string. It was tied in a knot she recognized. Her mother used to tie packages the same way when she sent holiday cookies in the mail. It moved again, curling toward her fingers like it knew her. One opens, one enters, one stays. The voice behind the door repeated, and now Maeve understood. It wasn't giving her options. It was giving her a role. She reached for the string. The instant she touched it, the candlelight flared, then extinguished all at once. Darkness swallowed the room. And from that darkness came sound, not the hum this time, but voices. Hundreds, whispering over each other like wind through dying trees. She's here. She remembers. She's the one who heard us. Then silence. The string tightened around her fingers, wrapping up her wrists like a living thread, then slithered away into the door. A seam split down the center. It opened, not like a door, but like lips parting. Warm air gusted from within, thick with the smell of rot, copper, and something sweeter, decay dressed up in perfume. A mockery of welcome. Beyond the door, stairs descended, not made of wood or stone, but of bone, ribs, vertebrae, femurs, all fused into a spiral staircase that vanished into the dark. Maeve hesitated. Then something moved behind her. She turned. The cavern was no longer empty. Figures lined the walls, pale, faceless shapes, tall and still. They stood like watchers, arms too long, fingers twitching in rhythm with the distant hum that had returned, now buried deep on the floor like a heartbeat from below. She took a step toward the stairs. The figures did not move. A second step. They tilted their heads in unison. Maeve descended. Every footfall echoed too long. Like the bones beneath her feet, remembered every step ever taken here. The deeper she went, the warmer the air became. Clammy, smelling of something that had not seen light in centuries. Eventually, she came to the bottom. A chamber opened before her. Vast, cathedral-like, the ceiling lost in shadow. Columns of twisted limbs lined the path, all reaching upward in silent agony. In the center of the room stood a stone cradle. She did not want to see what was inside, but she walked toward it anyway. Inside the cradle, wrapped in stained linen, lay a book, bound in something leathery, veins still pulsing. The title was burned into the cover. The House Remembers. Maeve picked it up. It opened on its own. Inside, pages made of skin. Words inked in something dark and sticky. Every page told a story. She saw her mother, younger, lost in the same woods, knocking on a door that wasn't hers. She saw herself, age 10, peering into the fireplace one winter night, seeing something move that wasn't flame. She saw every dream she ever forgot, every shadow she dismissed. The book turned another page. It showed her face. Not now. Years from now. Eyes like stone. Mouth stitched shut. Standing by the cabin's window, watching someone else arrive down the same humming road. A new name beneath the image. Caretaker. The hum rose again, and from the columns came a slow shuffling. The figures, those faceless, long-limbed things, descended the stairs behind her, arms raised, pointing. One word echoed through the chamber, spoken by every voice in unison. Stay. The cradle closed. The book vanished from her hands, and the staircase behind her sealed with bone. The cradle was gone. So was the book. And the staircase behind Maeve, now fused entirely into the wall of bone and flesh, no longer bore the shape of anything human built. There was no going back. The path she'd taken had sealed itself as though it had never existed. The stone floor beneath her feet grew warm, soft, pulsing in gentle rhythm with a hum that vibrated up through her heels. All around her, the faceless figures stood in a perfect ring. They did not speak again. They did not move. Their arms had dropped to their sides, and their attention, if such creatures had attention, was now turned inward, as though listening to a sermon she could not hear. Maeve took a slow step forward. As she moved, so did the space. The walls rippled, not metaphorically, literally, like curtains in a deep ocean current. The walls of the cathedral breathed in and out, dimly lit by a light source with no origin. Shapes passed behind the stone. Faces, antlers, shadows. The floor quivered under her next step. The hum changed pitch. It was not a song anymore. It was a word, Maeve, drawn forward by the vibration alone. She followed the slight curve of the chamber, passing beneath arches made of rib cages fused with tree branches. Vines slithered along the walls like veins. They recoiled as she passed, as though tasting her. At the far end of the chamber stood a figure, alone, tall, impossibly tall. Skin pulled taut over a frame too spindly to be human. It had a face like wax melted over a skull, but its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed faintly like twin candles burning in the fog. Its antlers bending on themselves, twisted like gnarled roots, draped in robes that looked like wet bark. It stood silent, still. Maeve stopped. The figure raised one hand and pointed. Behind it, a narrow doorway pulsed open like a gill. Maeve said nothing, but a pressure formed behind her eyes, as if something inside her knew what that gesture meant. She was being allowed through, not invited, not welcomed, permitted. She stepped through the door. The air on the other side was freezing. Her breath fogged in an instant. The passage sloped downward again, narrower and darker than before. The walls grew wet, slick with something like sap. The air buzzed with faint whispers, none in a language she knew, but they stirred memories. One voice, above the rest, was her mother's. You were born here, in the shadow of it. You were marked. Maeve blinked. The words were inside her head. More whispers joined. Her grandmother's voice, her aunt's, women she barely remembered, and others she didn't know at all. A bloodline uncoiling inside her mind like a scroll. They had all been here, all chosen, all kept. The tunnel ended at another door, smaller, wooden, unlocked. She opened it. Inside, a perfect replica of her childhood bedroom. The same pale purple walls, the stuffed deer on the shelf, her name carved faintly into the bed frame with a safety pin. The only thing different was the mirror, larger than she remembered, standing floor, the ceiling in the corner. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her without a sound. Silence. No hum. No whispers. Only the sound of her own breath, quick and shallow. She walked to the bed and touched the sheets. Clean, smooth, warm. Then the mirror rippled. It didn't reflect the room behind her. It didn't reflect her. It showed another Maeve. Older, pale, hair falling out in long clumps, eyes completely black. She wore a robe the color of bark. Her lips moved, but the reflection made no sound. Maeve leaned closer. The mirror froze. The older version of her smiled. Behind that version, in the reflected room, something crept into frame. The figure from the Bone Cathedral, the antlered thing. It placed one long hand on the shoulder of the older Maeve. She did not flinch. She nodded, and then Maeve saw her own lips move. She heard her voice inside her mind again. I will stay. I always do. The mirror cracked. One single fracture, spreading like lightning across the surface. She staggered back. Behind her, the door had vanished. In its place, a narrow hallway had grown out of the wall, twisting like a root through soil. Maeve walked through it. She didn't feel like she was walking anymore. She felt like she was being absorbed. The tunnel opened into a smaller room. At the center, a black, bottomless well. The whispers returned. So many voices. So many names. So many Maeves. And from the well, a single phrase rose like smoke. All who leave forget. All who stay remember. Which are you? Maeve stared into the well. Something stared back. The well pulsed as if alive. Its darkness not emptiness, but a surface, flexing gently, responding to her breath. The voice within was not a single speaker, but a chorus of countless memories braided together. Each syllable felt wet, warm, close. Which are you? Maeve took a trembling step toward the edge. Her boot sank slightly into the soft stone around the well's base. The rim was inscribed with grooves, concentric circles repeating eyes, and marks that looked like scratches made by human fingernails. Each symbol tugged at something in her skull, as if her mind remembered what her memory had buried. She crouched and touched the rim. It was cold, then hot, then empty, as if touching it pulled something out of her, like a thread slipping free from fabric. A sharp sound broke the silence, not from the well. Behind her, footsteps. Maeve rose slowly and turned. The hallway had closed. In its place stood a figure. She almost didn't recognize the woman. She was older, thinner, wearing clothes that were once hers, her red flannel, her boots, but hollowed, like something had sucked the light from inside her. Her skin was pallid, papery, and her mouth was sewn shut with fine red thread. Still, Maeve knew her, herself. The other Maeve raised a hand. She pointed down into the well, slowly, gently, as though repeating a ritual long practiced. Then, with the other hand, she pointed to her sewn lips. Maeve understood. No voice, no forgetting. She had stayed, and those who stayed become part of the house. Maeve backed away from the rim. The air behind her shifted. Another figure had joined the room. This one stooped, its head twisted sideways on a neck too long. It wore a child's dress. No face, just black holes for eyes and a mouth that opened and closed in silent gasps. It crawled toward her on too many limbs. She stepped back again. The space responded. The well pulsed brighter now, as if reacting to her fear. Light shimmered faintly from the depths, a reflection, perhaps, or something imitating light. The water, or whatever it was, rippled in perfect silence. Which are you? The chorus repeated again, louder. Maeve's heartbeat thundered in her chest. Her breath shortened. She turned in a slow circle. The room had changed. The mirror from her childhood room was now here, growing like a flower from the wall. Within it, dozens of reflections of herself, each one in different clothing at different ages. Some weeping, some rotting. One of them clawed at the inside of the mirror with bloodied fingers, screaming a soundless warning. The well called louder. She looked again, and the water wasn't black anymore. It showed the road, that old, humming road winding through whispering pines. Her car parked just outside the cabin, her own face younger, frightened, stepping out. She saw herself from above, like a memory observing its host. That version hadn't entered yet, not completely. She was being offered a way out. The well was not just a hole, it was a bridge, or a choice. Leave and forget, stay and remember. A whisper now, behind her shoulder, One always stays. The crawling girl thing moaned, louder now, its eyes flickering like candle flames. The sewn mouth Maeve pointed again, urgently this time, toward the well, or into it. She had to choose. Maeve reached out toward the mirror, toward the her that might still escape. It shattered. The floor jolted as the shards fell upward. Yes, upward, rising like ash to the ceiling, where they embedded into the stone. The well was the only thing left now. It glowed softly, warmly. A lullaby rose from the depths. Her mother's voice. "You're home, little one. Come rest. Come sleep." Maeve stepped to the edge. She looked down. The reflection showed nothing now. No road, no sky, just herself. Eyes closed, smiling, and something pale standing behind her, its antlers brushing the ceiling of her skull. Maeve stood at the edge of the well, motionless, arms at her sides. Her reflection in the water gazed back with eyes closed, peaceful, almost serene, but the figure behind her in the reflection was anything but. Its antlers branched endlessly, fractal-like, touching every part of the ceiling and curling back toward her like vines reaching for warmth. Its body was too thin to be real, too tall to have ever lived, and its mouth, where a mouth should have been, was instead a gaping vertical slit running down its face, stitched loosely like a torn sack. Breathing, sighing. The lullaby continued, soft and low, but now with words. "Sleep, little light. Sleep and be seen no more." The room darkened around her, as if the well's light had become the only light left. Even the whispering figures, the silent Maeves, the crawling child thing, the antlered sentries, faded into a gray stillness. Her mind pulled inward, soft and heavy, the way it feels just before sleep, when reality wavers and time forgets itself. But even as her limbs slackened and her breath slowed, a memory bubbled up from somewhere deep, sharper than the rest. Her mother, not in a dream, not in a hallucination, but real. A night when Maeve had been 9 years old, standing in the hallway outside her mother's bedroom, unable to sleep. The door had been slightly open. She had peered inside and seen her mother sitting upright in bed, whispering to the wall, not in panic, not in fear, but with reverence. "One always stays," she'd said, not noticing Maeve watching. And now, that voice repeated in the back of her skull. Not her mother's, not her own, something older. "You always were the brightest one. That's why we chose you." Maeve's head snapped up. The antlered one had moved. It now stood across from her, on the other side of the well, mirroring her posture exactly. Its stitched mouth flexed, the threads pulling taut, releasing a sound like wind whistling through splintered wood. It raised its hand. So did Maeve, not of her own accord. "You've been here before," it said, not aloud, but through the floor, the stone, the bones in her skull. "And you'll return. You always do, until you remember everything." The lullaby faded. The hum returned, harsher now, mechanical, almost like a broken engine hidden beneath the ground. Throbbing in time with her own heart, Maeve fell to her knees. The well was changing again. Now it showed the cabin, only not as it was, as it had once been. Brighter. Oh, no, dust. Curtains clean. A woman by the hearth, brushing ash from the stone. Her hair was auburn, curled behind her ears. Her smile looked familiar. Maeve gasped. It was her grandmother. And behind her, a girl, tiny, for maybe 5 years old, playing with red string, winding it through her fingers. Maeve, it was her. She had been here. This had been her home. That's what her mother had meant. The cabin hadn't been inherited. It had been returned. The antlered one knelt across from her now, folding itself impossibly to mirror her again. "Your line remembers. But you forgot. You were taken out before the exchange." She stared. "Exchange?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. The creature tilted its head. The stitched mouth curved slightly. "One leaves. One stays. Balance. The memory shifted again. Her mother crying in the woods, holding a baby wrapped in blankets, leaving the child on the cabin's porch, knocking once, then turning and walking away. Maeve, taken, raised elsewhere, not chosen that year, not claimed, until now, until she returned her own will. The antlered one reached out its long hand. On its palm was a spiral of skin. In the center, a small blood-red seed. Maeve understood. It wasn't punishment. It was invitation. To stay. To remember. To keep the house. The room shimmered. A warm breeze passed through. The scent of pine, of moss, of old stone and buried memory. Behind her, she heard footsteps, small barefoot. She turned. A child stood at the well's edge. A little girl, wide-eyed, familiar, her, from the well's reflection. Looking up at herself with wonder, the girl reached out to Maeve, just as the antlered one did. 2 hands, 2 paths, stay or return. Her fingers hovered between them, and the hum deepened, becoming a heartbeat, her own, and something else's. Maeve stood between 2 outstretched hands. One belonged to the antlered one, ancient and composed, its skin stretched like birch bark around bone. It offered the seed, blood-red and glistening, still pulsing in rhythm with her own breath. The other hand was small and soft, belonging to the child, to her, though impossibly younger. This was the part of her that had once been spared. She didn't know how long she stood frozen there, knees trembling, mouth dry, lungs filled with the damp air of the chamber that shouldn't exist. The hum had dulled into a low, thick throb in her skull, and the silence between pulses echoed louder than anything. Then the child spoke. No lips moved. Her voice arrived as thought, as memory, carried through the bones beneath the floor. If you come with me, you will forget. The antlered one nodded. Its stitched mouth uncurled slightly, not in kindness, but in finality. If you stay, it said, you will remember everything. The child turned her face up, and in her eyes was something horrible and beautiful. Maeve saw her own birth in those eyes. She saw the cabin long before it decayed. She saw other women, some who looked like her, others not, standing at the edge of the same well. Some had screamed, some had jumped, all had chosen. Maeve's mind cracked open like rotting wood. The house was in place. It was a memory, an organism, a womb, and she was meant to be its keeper. It didn't want to eat her. It wanted her to tend it, to become it. She dropped to her knees and let her hands fall. The child withdrew. The antlered one remained. It stepped forward silently. No footsteps, no air disturbed, no motion but absolute certainty. It knelt in front of her and gently placed the seed on her chest. She didn't flinch. It dissolved instantly, seeping into her skin like water into cloth. A cold so profound it burned, then vanished. The well behind her closed, not with noise, but with an unmaking. The stone of the room softened. The walls grew bark. Roots pushed down from the ceiling like chandeliers, swaying gently in time with her breath. The antlered one rose, its task complete. It stepped backward, becoming part of the rootwork, its form vanishing slowly into twisting wood. The hum stopped, not all at once, but it tapered, like a storm slipping into memory. Maeve was alone. The girl was gone. Or perhaps she had never existed, not separately. Maeve stood. The walls shimmered again, and new light poured into the chamber. Not from a bulb, or a fire, or the sky. It came from within the wood itself. She followed it. The hallway behind her had returned, no longer narrow or choking. It welcomed her now. It had become her. With each step, her thoughts settled. Not dulled, not erased, arranged. Memories returned in patterns like constellations. Every dream she'd ever had of forests. Every flicker of movement just beyond the edge of sleep. Her mother whispering to the wall. The warmth in the cabin's banister. The letters with no return address. All part of a single story. Hers. She reached the door. Wooden, familiar, carved with a spiral made of eyes. She opened it. Beyond was the cabin, not as it had been when she arrived, but restored, clean, alive. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. Fresh pine needles littered the front porch. The smell of firewood and lavender filled the air. Everything in the house had been placed with care. The table was set for one. On the mantel sat a new photo of her now, smiling softly. She walked to the window and looked out. The road hummed still but quieter now. It didn't beckon. It didn't call. It simply was. And someone was approaching, a figure on foot, tired, cautious. Their silhouette passed beneath the trees. Another drawn to the house. Another called by the hum. Maeve stepped back from the window. She walked to the door, and she waited. Maeve stood behind the cabin's front door, her fingers resting gently on the cold brass knob. She didn't open it. Not yet. The hum in the road was growing again, steady, low, rhythmic. It wasn't singing to her anymore. It was singing to the one who approached. She could feel them even before they came into view. Not with her eyes, with something else. A new sense had bloomed inside her, one that pulsed behind her forehead and rooted deep beneath her ribs. It was not quite thought, not quite instinct. It was a house. It whispered, closer, almost here. The knob grew warm under her hand. Outside, gravel shifted beneath hesitant feet. She waited until the humming reached its highest pitch. That particular tone, the one just above human hearing, but deep enough to feel in your bones, was the call, the summons, the moment before remembering begins. Then, footsteps on the porch. Maeve opened the door. There stood a woman in her 30s, rain-damp hair clinging to her face, a map clutched in her fist. Confused, pale, uncertain. They always looked the same. Eyes wide with that mixture of exhaustion and curiosity. Like they'd woken from a dream they didn't remember, drawn forward by some thread they couldn't name. She was exactly where Maeve had once been. "I think I'm lost," the woman said. Her voice was dry, almost apologetic. Maeve smiled, calm, kind. Something old flickered behind her eyes. "You're not," she said. "Is this Whispering Pines?" the woman asked, glancing over her shoulder. "I was headed for a rental cabin, but the GPS... It brought you here," Maeve finished gently. "As it should." A moment of pause. The woman looked up at the cabin, eyes lingering on the window, the roof, the strange way the corners of the house didn't quite meet. She took a step backward. The house sighed, soft, barely audible, but the woman felt it. Her body stiffened slightly. The hair on her arms rose. Then, against her better judgment, against every quiet alarm in her mind, she stepped forward. Maeve held the door open. She led the woman inside. The cabin welcomed her. The hearth glowed with fire. The chair in a corner looked soft. The air smelled of cedar, cinnamon, and warm dust. A table had been set. A note waited beside a teacup. "Do not answer knocks after midnight. They don't knock twice." The woman read it, blinked, and frowned. Maeve said nothing. She only watched. She had watched many, and many would follow. The woman explored the house slowly, unsure of why she stayed. She lingered at mirrors. She touched the banister. Her fingers traced the worn, spiraling carvings in the walls. Her phone buzzed. The signal died. The painting above the fireplace, now just matte black, held her gaze for a moment too long. Then footsteps upstairs. Soft, dry, dragging. The woman froze. Maeve spoke quietly behind her. "It's better if you don't go up yet." The woman turned. "What is this place?" Maeve's answer came without hesitation. "A memory." The woman stared at her. "Whose?" Maeve's smile was thin, distant. "Ours." That night, Maeve did not sleep. She sat in the chair by the window, watching the trees sway, listening to the humming road settle into silence. The newcomer, whatever her name was, lay asleep on the couch, arm draped off the edge, fingers twitching with dreams. Maeve knew what the woman would see. The spiral of bone, the chamber of root and stone, the mirror that would crack, the well that would call. She would be shown all of it if she stayed long enough, if she remembered enough, and eventually she would be given a choice. One always stays, the others forget. Outside, the road pulsed once more. Another was on the way. The humming didn't stop this time. It lingered like a distant storm behind the trees, vibrating in the branches, echoing in the air itself. It had changed its rhythm, no longer soft and lulling, but steady, deliberate, calling. Maeve felt it in her teeth now, in the bones of the house. It was not one traveler this time. It was two. She stepped away from the window and went to the front door again. She didn't open it yet. There was a rhythm to these things, a pattern that should not be broken. Behind her, the woman who had arrived yesterday stirred on the couch. She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her eyes were wide. "I had a dream," she whispered. "I saw something underground. I think it was me." Maeve nodded. The woman's eyes welled with tears. "I was in a room with no doors. There was a mirror, and it showed me as a child. And something else. I think I touched it. I think I touched." She stopped. She was remembering too quickly. Too fast, and the mind would break. Too slow, and it would forget. The house needed her, just long enough to show her the choice. Maeve gently placed a hand on the woman's shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe. Just rest." The woman looked at her with suspicion, but she obeyed. She lay back down, her eyes still fixed on Maeve's face. "I know you," she said softly. "Don't I?" Maeve smiled. "We've met before," she whispered. Then she walked back to the window. The trees parted. Two shapes now, moving steadily up the road. A man and a woman, mid-40s, hiking packs. They walked slowly, as if drawn forward not by will, but by gravity. Their faces were slack with sleep they hadn't earned. He held a paper map. She carried a broken compass dangling from her fingers. Maeve opened the door. They stopped at the foot of the porch. "We're looking for whispering pines," the woman said. "We took the forest loop, but the trail markers disappeared." Maeve looked past them. There were no markers. There never had been. "You found it," she said gently. The man frowned. "This doesn't look like a park lodge. Is it private?" Maeve stepped aside. "You can come in." They hesitated, and that was the test. Those who belonged here never argued long. Curiosity always won. The man entered first. The woman followed. The hum grew louder for just a second, then died to a murmur. The house rearranged itself again. The layout shifted when no one looked. Hallways stretching, closets vanishing, doors appearing where they hadn't been. The air took on a new scent. Sage, pine tar, and the copper tang of something beneath the floorboards. Upstairs, the boards creaked. The new guest froze. "Is someone else staying here?" the woman asked. Maeve tilted her head. "Sometimes," she said. That night, all three newcomers dreamed. Maeve walked through their rooms in silence, barefoot, the hem of her old flannel brushing the floor. She did not disturb them. She only listened. She heard their dreams as if they were songs playing in reverse. The first woman, the one who had come yesterday, was beneath the house now, in her dream. She was a child again, trying to trace a spiral into the dirt with her fingers. Each time she reached the center, it bled. She kept going. The man saw the forest frozen in time. Deer turned to stone, trees growing in perfect circles. His reflection in a pool of water opened its eyes and whispered something he had already forgotten. The second woman was drowning, not in water, in hands. Pale, endless hands, growing like vines from the ceiling, wrapping around her arms and legs, pulling her into a room made of mirrors. Maeve heard it all. She remembered every one of their dreams. That was her task now. The house needed someone to keep the pattern, someone to hold the memory. She returned to her chair by the window. The fire had long since burned down the coals, but it warmed her still. Outside, the road no longer hummed. It waited. In the morning, the man came down first. His eyes were hollow, rimmed in shadow. Is this the bed and breakfast or something? Maeve poured him tea. It's whatever you need it to be, she said. He looked at her hand. Something flickered in his eyes. Do I know you? She smiled. Not yet. Behind him, the others came down. They looked at each other, uncertain. All of them had dreamed. All of them had touched something. None of them spoke of it. Not yet. When the first knock came that night, they all froze. Maeve stood slowly. It was just past midnight. The house fell silent. Only one knock. Sharp, dry, final. The woman from the day before spoke first. Her voice barely above a whisper. Do we answer it? Maeve turned toward them. Her eyes were darker now. Not evil. Not cruel. Just heavy, like they had carried generations. She said the words with slow, clear certainty. Not after midnight. She looked at the others, each of them pale, unsure, almost remembering. They don't knock twice. And as the second knock came, soft wit from the window this time, the lights dimmed, and the house held its breath. The second knock did not echo. It landed in the room like a breathless thing. Quiet but final, a sound that demanded reverence. The lights flickered, dimmed again, then settled into a sickly amber hue, casting long, trembling shadows across the floorboards. No one moved. Maeve didn't need to check the window. She already knew what stood behind the glass. The woman from the first night, curled in the armchair with her knees drawn up, clutched a pillow to her chest. Her lips moved soundlessly. Her eyes were wide but focused, not on the window, but something only she could see. A memory rising to meet her. The man stood behind the couch, jaw clenched, knuckles white. He hadn't spoken since the first knock. Now his head was tilted slightly, as though straining to listen to something deep underground. The second woman, quietest of them all, was shaking gently. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She kept glancing at the hallway, as though waiting for something to come down the stairs. Maeve watched them in silence. They were blooming, just as she had. Some took longer than others. Some resisted. Others gave in too quickly and lost their minds to the spiral. But all of them eventually reached the same door, the one in their dreams, the one beneath the house. It was only a matter of when. Outside the window, a shadow moved, not past it, through it, thin, impossibly tall. The silhouette stretched across the living room wall, reaching toward the ceiling like smoke. No limbs, no face, just presence. The room dropped 10 degrees in a breath. The fire coughed once on the hearth, and then died. Maeve stood. She crossed the floor with measured steps and closed the curtain gently, as if tucking a child into bed. Behind her, the man found his voice. Who was that? Maeve didn't turn. She ran her fingers down the fabric of the curtain. The embroidered spiral there had not been present the day before, but it was there now, as it always had been. It's not a who, she said. The second woman spoke next. Her voice was hollow but steady. It's watching us. Maeve turned and looked at her. No, she said softly. It's waiting. That night, none of them slept. The house shifted again, walls settling, doorways narrowing slightly. The sound of breathing came from vents that hadn't been there before. The lights flickered in a rhythm none of them could name, but all of them felt. It matched their heartbeats. Maeve didn't speak much. She didn't have to. The house was teaching them now. At 3:11 a.m., the basement door opened on its own. None of them had noticed it before. It was hidden behind a small hanging tapestry. When the man discovered it, drawn toward it like a moth to flame, he called the others. I think there's something down there. Maeve didn't answer. The woman from the armchair stepped forward, hesitated at the threshold. It smelled of roots and mildew, and something older, the kind of scent that can't be placed. That smells like a memory of something you were never told. The second woman stood beside her, whispering, I've seen this place before. Maeve nodded. Of course you have. She lit 3 candles, placed them into their hands. Not torches, not flashlights. The house didn't like artificial light. They descended together. Maeve didn't follow. She waited by the door, her hand resting lightly on the frame. The house pulsed gently around her, its heartbeat slow and patient. They would see the carvings first, then the altar, then the well. Every guest did. Every time. Some returned. Some didn't. One always stayed. Hours passed. Morning light crept over the horizon. The house yawned, and the basement door remained open. Maeve walked back into the kitchen. The table had reset itself. 4 cups of tea, one already cooling. She took the seat by the window and watched the humming road. It was quiet now, empty, but not for long. Something stirred in the trees. Another was coming. The house already knew their name. The basement door had remained open all night. From where Maeve sat in the kitchen, she could still hear it breathing. Not the guests, the house. The house always exhaled when someone crossed the threshold into the deep, and now it inhaled, slowly, like lungs filling with memories. Down there, the spiral turned. She could feel it turning beneath her feet. The spiral wasn't made of stone or bone or even the earth. It was made of thought and repetition and inheritance. It turned on its own. Every second, every heartbeat, every fear remembered too late. The guests would be walking it now. The man, the women, slowly at first, uncertain. But the path would guide them, not by direction but by recognition. The deeper one walked, the more of oneself was returned. Pieces they didn't know they'd lost. Faces they had forgotten in dreams. Names whispered once through a baby monitor or in the hush of storm. Below, the 3 walked in silence. The walls curved around them, pulsing softly, covered in symbols that throbbed with dull, reddish light. They were not etched, not painted. They were grown, like tumors of memory. One of them shaped like an eye, another like a cradle, another like an open mouth with no tongue. The woman who had arrived first pressed her hand to one. It was warm. It opened. A seam split the wall beside her, not violently, but like skin yielding to a trusted knife. Inside the hollow, a chair, a child's chair, tiny wooden, painted white and flaking, and sitting on it, a doll, its face torn, stitched back together in a spiral. No eyes, no mouth, just a seam black thread tied in a perfect bow. She stepped back, said nothing, but the second woman put a hand on her shoulder. They were remembering the same thing now. The man was farther ahead. His candle sputtered, but the flame refused to die. He walked the path, one step at a time, mouth slightly open, as if expecting to taste something in the air. He passed the mirrored roots, the veins that blinked, the walled hands, all of them facing outward, palms open, fingers slightly curled, not beckoning, not threatening, just waiting. He stopped at the end of the spiral. There in the center was a room without shape, no corners, no ceiling, no gravity. It moved with him, not around him. And in the very center, a pool, still, not water, not blood, memory. He knelt beside it. He looked into it, and it looked back. The pool showed him not who he was, but who he'd almost become, lives he'd never lived, children he might have had, words he had swallowed, regrets that had nested quietly beneath his ribs, never hatched. He tried to turn away. He couldn't. From the pool rose a hand, thin, familiar, his own. It touched his chest once, and he remembered the cabin from a dream he'd had as a child. The fire, the girl with no eyes, the red string. He began to cry, softly, with no voice. Upstairs, May felt the moment pass. The spiral had completed one turn. One of them had seen. Whether they would return remained to be seen. She stood and walked to the hearth. On the mantel, a new photograph had appeared. She didn't place it there. It never mattered who placed them. In the photo, the man sat in the kitchen. Same clothes, different eyes. Behind him, a mirror showed his reflection, smiling. But he wasn't smiling in the foreground. Maeve turned away. The floor creaked behind her. Footsteps. One set. Bare feet. The first woman had returned, but her eyes were wrong. Not empty, just quiet. She looked at Maeve for a long time. Then, where the others? Maeve's reply came gently. Like a lullaby she no longer remembered learning. They're walking the spiral. The woman nodded slowly, and from her lips came a word that wasn't quite a question or command. It was a repetition. A vow. One stays. Maeve smiled. The woman sat in the armchair, curled her knees beneath her, and closed her eyes. She would rest now, until the house called her again. Outside, the wind shifted. The trees leaned toward the road. A new humming began, deep, mournful, low. Another was coming. Another drawn to what had been forgotten. Another memory returning to the house. The wind curled around the eave of the cabin like a living thing, threading its fingers through the loose slats and warped boards, humming a sound that didn't travel by ear but by marrow. The sound of the road was changing again, no longer a beckoning, no longer the gentle vibration of invitation, but something deeper, something that sounded like a name, not spoken aloud, but remembered. Maeve stood at the front window, watching the pines, their tall, dark silhouettes dance in slow, unhurried rhythm, swaying not to the wind but to something else. The forest had always moved like that when someone was getting close. But this time it felt different. The spiral had turned too quickly. 3 had gone down. Only 1 had returned. And now the forest itself was stirring. The pines shifted, and in the thin silver light of early dawn, something emerged. Not a person. Not exactly. A figure in red, walking barefoot, face covered by a wide-brimmed hat. Tall and still, every movement deliberate. Branches leaned away as it passed. The air around it shimmered. It did not walk like a person lost. It walked like something returning. Maeve's throat tightened. She knew this figure. Had seen it once before in the mirror beneath the house. It had reached for her then. Now it was here. Real. The sound of approaching was not footsteps, but a sound like leaves turning in a book. A flutter of pages. A story flipping forward. Or back. Maeve stepped away from the window. The woman in the armchair opened one eye. Slowly. You feel it too, she whispered. Maeve nodded. It's different this time. Downstairs, the spiral pulsed. The man had not returned. The second woman had not emerged. The house was holding them. Not like a prison. Not like a trap. But like a hand holding breath. Waiting, waiting, waiting. For what? For this one. The red figure reached the porch. It did not knock. Instead, it stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly to the side, waiting. Maeve opened the door without a word. The figure stepped inside. Up close. It was not quite man or woman. Its body shifted subtly with each breath. One moment tall and masculine, the next curved and delicate. Its features were soft and vague, like someone half remembered from a childhood fever dream. Only the hat remained the same, wide, velvet, ancient. It removed the hat slowly, and Maeve saw her own face. Not a reflection, not a twin, not a trick. Herself, from a time that hadn't happened yet. A version of her not shaped by choices she remembered making. Older, wiser, empty in the eyes. The house shuddered softly beneath their feet. The figure opened its mouth and spoke a word. Not a word of language. A sound that was meaning itself. The name of the house. Dahlgren. Maeve staggered slightly. The woman in the chair clutched her ears. The word passed through the walls, into the roots beneath the floor, into the bones of the forgotten spiral below. Candles flickered and died. Mirrors cracked. The fire relit itself. The house woke up. Not fully, but enough. In the basement, the second woman opened her eyes. She was standing at the edge of the memory pool. The man was gone. The pool was still, but the room around her had changed. The roots had curled inward, forming an arch over the water. A great shape, antlered, hovered behind it, watching without breathing. Then the whisper, "She has returned." The second woman looked up toward the ceiling and screamed. Upstairs, Maeve did not flinch. The red-clad version of her stood silently in the foyer, hat held against its chest. Its eyes never left hers. "You're me," Maeve said at last. The figure nodded. "What version?" The lips parted again, and this time the voice was hers, but cracked hollow, like a shell with wind blowing through it. "The last." Maeve blinked. "No, that can't be. I just became keeper. I'm not done." The figure smiled. "You've always been done. This place doesn't pass forward, only sideways. Backward. You were never the first." She shook her head. "You're lying." The figure tilted its head. "Do you remember your mother's hands?" Maeve paused. "Yes." "And her mother's?" A beat. "And the one before her?" Silence. The red-clad figure stepped closer, lifted its hand, and pressed its palm to Maeve's forehead. The flood came instantly. A cascade of women. Hundreds. Each bearing her face or her hair or her walk or her eyes. Each one with a different name. And each one repeating the same words. "I will stay. I always do." When the flood subsided, Maeve was on her knees. The woman in the chair stared at her, trembling. "What is this place?" Maeve looked up, eyes wide. "It's me," she said. "Then it's you. And finally, it's all of us." The figure in red was gone, but the hat remained, sitting neatly on the banister. The spiral beneath the floor had stopped turning, but not from rest, from anticipation. The house was still waiting. One guest remained below, and the house never forgets a name. The second woman had not screamed again. She stood at the edge of the spiral pool, her voice long gone, throat raw from a single cry that echoed through the bones of the house hours earlier. The scream hadn't come from fear, not exactly. It had been recognition. A part of her, buried deep beneath the story she'd been told and the life she thought was hers, had heard the words spoken upstairs, Dahlgren, and it had awakened something ancient. Now she stood still. The well no longer shimmered with memories. It showed only the surface of the room behind her. Curved walls breathing like lungs, carvings twitching softly in the dim glow of memory root. And behind her, in the reflection, something waited in the shadows. Not the antlered figure, not Maeve, something else. A woman, her back turned, hair gray and falling in long cords down her spine. The woman was humming, a tune from childhood. The second woman turned. Slowly. There was no one there. Only dust. Only the spiral. Only her. But the humming continued. It came from the walls. She pressed her hand against one of the carvings. The spiral etched in threes, branching like fingers, and the sound vibrated through her arm, through her chest, settling behind her eyes like an old bruise rising to the surface. "What do you remember?" The house whispered. She tried to answer, but her tongue would not move. Instead, she closed her eyes. She let the sound in, and the memories rose. Not hers, not entirely. Upstairs, Maeve was walking the hallway again. Barefoot, she didn't need candles. The spiral now lived inside her. It twisted gently behind her ribs, guiding her. The other woman, the one who had returned first, sat silently in the kitchen now, staring at her tea. It had gone cold hours ago, but she hadn't moved. Her pupils were wide and glassy, her breathing slow. She wasn't asleep. She was inside. Maeve knew what that meant. The house had accepted her. She would remain long enough to welcome the next. Maeve turned the corner at the end of the hall, where the old door had appeared 2 nights ago. The one no one remembered opening. It was ajar now, just wide enough to whisper. Maeve stepped through. The room was small, just a bed, a single chair, a mirror above the desk, and a painting. New. Wet paint still clung to the canvas in streaks. Maeve stepped closer. It was a portrait of herself, but not just her. There were layers. Her face, atop another, and another, and another, all of them almost her, some with her eyes, some with her smile, some with neither, all of them fading into a spiral. Maeve reached out and touched the painting. The surface was warm. The spiral moved. She inhaled sharply. It was time. Below, the second woman knelt beside the pool now. The humming in the walls had grown quiet. A single note remained, a low, constant tone that felt like the deep groan of the earth settling into itself. The pool had begun to rise. Not water, not memory. Light, golden, thin and full of scent, jasmine and cedar and old, yellowed pages. The second woman opened her mouth and remembered. She remembered the dream she'd had at 6 years old, of a hallway that changed shape when no one looked. She remembered the whisper she'd heard in a grocery store once, from a stranger who touched her arm and said, "You're almost ready." She remembered a lullaby her mother had never sung, and a tree she'd drawn again and again as a child, with eyes in the bark and spirals in its leaves. She remembered Maeve, not the woman upstairs now, but the one before her, the one she had buried. Her. She had been Maeve once, before the forgetting, before the house gave her a new name. Tears slipped down her cheeks as a golden light washed over her face, filling her mouth, her lungs, her mind. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Upstairs, the painting stopped moving. The spiral within it settled. Maeve stepped back. The door behind her closed. She didn't open it again. Instead, she walked the front door. She placed her hand on the knob. The house pulsed. Another was coming. Not just any traveler. A child. Alone. The house rarely called them so young, unless they had already been part of it. Unless they were returning. Maeve opened the door. Outside, beneath the gray dawn, stood a little boy, no more than 7, shoes untied, leaves in his hair. He looked up at her with calm, hollow eyes and said, "I heard your name in my sleep." Maeve knelt, heart beating slowly. "And what name did you hear?" The boy smiled, like someone repeating a secret. Dahlgren. And from the basement, the spiral turned once more. Maeve held the boy's small hand in her own. It was cold, not from the weather. It was early summer, and the pines dripped with warm dew, but with that same ancient chill she had felt when she touched the antlered things offering in the chamber below. Not death, not fear, just absence. A piece of the child had been taken. Quietly, long before his feet found the road, but he had followed it all the same. They always did. She led him inside. The others were waiting. The woman in the kitchen raised her head as the door shut, her face lit, but not with recognition, with purpose. The boy looked at her briefly, then walked past her, up the stairs, without being told where to go. Maeve didn't follow. She stood still. The spiral behind her ribs turned a fraction to the left. It had changed direction. For the first time since she'd become keeper, she felt it move backward. The house was reaching for something it had lost, or someone. The woman stepped forward and spoke to Maeve, her voice hushed. "Why is he here?" Maeve didn't answer. She didn't know, and that terrified her more than anything else the house had ever shown her. Upstairs, the boy opened every door and hallway, one by one. Behind the first, a closet, empty, except for a wooden mobile of painted birds hanging from the ceiling. It spun when he looked at it. Behind the second, a mirror. No room, just a standing mirror. The glass didn't reflect him. It showed a hallway with different wallpaper and a dog curled on a rug, sleeping. Behind the third, himself. The room was exactly as he remembered. Bed with the astronaut comforter, stars on the ceiling, the smell of pine and old laundry, a photo of his mother on the nightstand, smiling just a little too wide, as though someone had whispered something awful just before the shutter clicked. He walked inside and closed the door behind him. Down below, Maeve sat in her chair. She hadn't moved since the boy disappeared upstairs. The fire crackled again, though she hadn't lit it. The spiral was still. The woman across the room watched her carefully and finally said, "He's not here for us, is he?" Maeve blinked. "No." The woman stared at her tea again, then added, "Will he stay?" Maeve shook her head slowly. "No child ever does. Not unless they were born inside." The woman went quiet. Then, "But he wasn't he?" Maeve said nothing. The fire hissed as something fell deep in the hearth, like a charred tooth giving way. The woman continued, "I saw him in the spiral. The day I came. He was older. He called your name." Maeve's hand twitched. The spiral inside her flinched. In the basement, the second woman, the one who had knelt beside the pool, stood now in a garden of mirrors. Each mirror bore a different reflection of her. One as a bride, one as a mother, one with empty eyes and a black veil, one whispering the name Dahlgren through cracked lips. She was being shown her paths, not to choose, to understand. Above her, footsteps moved across the floorboards, soft, childlike. The sound wrapped around her mind like thread. She looked up and spoke aloud for the first time since returning from the spiral's heart. "He's mine." Upstairs, the boy lay in the bed. He didn't remember, but instantly knew. The stars on the ceiling moved, not like stickers or glow-in-the-dark plastic. They spun and blinked and whispered. He closed his eyes and dreamed of fire, of old pines, of his mother's voice saying goodbye. But she hadn't spoken. She had only left him, in the clearing, on the doorstep, at the edge of the spiral. Maeve stood at the top of the stairs now. She could hear his breathing through the door. The spiral had turned again, not backward, not forward. Inside, the house was preparing something, not an exchange, not this time. Something older, older than Keeper, older than the red-cloaked reflection. Maeve pressed her palm to the door and whispered a word she hadn't spoken since childhood. Her own name, the one she'd given away when she agreed to stay. Aries. The door unlocked. Inside, the bed was empty. The boy was gone. Only a spiral carved into the pillow. Fresh, dripping, not with blood, with ink, a name, her name, overwritten, crossed out, replaced. From the basement, a cry rose. Not pain, not fear, recognition. The second woman had remembered everything. The house had shown her what it never showed anyone. The end of the spiral, where the road leads once it folds in on itself. And Maeve knew she had never been Keeper, only a page, and the book had turned itself. The boy was gone, not vanished, not stolen, just moved, the way a shadow slips across a floor when no one is watching. Maeve stood beside the bed, hands still resting on the pillow where his head had lain only moments before. The carved spiral etched into the linen pulsed softly beneath her palm, not with warmth, but memory. Fresh, too fresh. She recognized the script. It wasn't the boy's. It was hers. Not the Maeve she'd become, but the child she'd once been, the one who had come to the house long ago, barefoot and half forgotten. Aries, the name written below the spiral. Trembling, Maeve sat on the edge of bed and stared at it, willing herself to forget what she already knew. The house did not return names, not unless it was about to change something. Below, in the spiral chamber, the second woman stood among the mirrors. They had cracked, not from impact, but from refusal. Each reflection fractured differently. Some with mouths open in silent screams, others with eyes gouged out, spiral symbols swirling like galaxies where pupils should have been. She clutched her hands to her chest and whispered, "I know his name." The house responded not with voice, but vibration. The roots in the ceiling curled downward, brushing against her scalp like long, skeletal fingers. The pool at the center had gone dark, its glow withdrawn, as if watching. "Say it," the house urged. The woman trembled. The name it had stolen, the one she'd tried to forget. Her son's. The boy who had been born on the winter solstice, who never cried when he was hungry, who disappeared one night from his crib while she slept in a chair across the room. No signs of struggle, no broken glass, only a small spiral drawn in red crayon on the wall and the scent of cedar. She had stopped speaking after that night. Doctors said she had suffered a trauma, a break. No one else remembered the child. No hospital records, no photographs, no birth certificate. But she remembered the feeling, the cold of him, the wrongness, and the hum beneath her floorboards that started days before he vanished. Now she remembered his name, not the one she'd given him, but the one the house had taken. Upstairs, Maeve descended the stairs with slow, leaden steps. She didn't speak to the other woman, who still sat quietly at the kitchen table, tracing her fingertip around the rim of her cold teacup. Her eyes no longer blinked. She was inside the house now, fully, her memories tethered to the spiral. Another page in the book. Maeve walked to the fireplace. The photograph on the mantel had changed again. The boy's face now, standing in the spiral chamber, smiling, but his smile wasn't his. It was hers, Ares's, the smile she'd once wore in the mirror the morning she agreed to stay. Maeve's heart clenched. She turned away from the hearth and opened the door to the basement. She descended. The walls breathed. The spiral hummed. The mirrors had turned to face the center of the room now, and Maeve saw herself reflected from every angle, as child, as mother, as shadow, as stranger. And in the center, standing quietly beside the dark pool, the second woman. Her eyes were silver now, not with light, with memory. She turned slowly as Maeve stepped into the chamber. Their eyes met, and neither spoke. The boy stood between them, but only in the reflection. He looked up at both women and opened his mouth. From it came a voice that did not belong to a child. Who will take him back? The mirrors trembled. The spiral turned once more. Maeve fell to her knees. The second woman stepped forward and said the name. I called him Lure. The house shuddered. The walls cracked open. The pool rose again, not with light this time, but with names. Thousands of them, whispered in a storm of sound, cycling through the room like wind through dry leaves. The spiral in Maeve's chest twisted violently. She cried out. The mirrors shattered. The boy was gone again, but not to the spiral. Not this time. He had returned to his mother. The second woman collapsed. Maeve crawled forward, held her, watched as the silver drained from her eyes, replaced by the warm brown of memory restored. Upstairs, the other woman, the one who had watched everything unfold in silence, stood and walked to the door. The road hummed again. Its note was rising, calling someone new. But this time, she did not wait for a knock. She opened the door and stepped outside. In the spiral room, Maeve sat beside the second woman, both of them breathing in time with the house. The walls were quiet now, the pool still. The name Leor lingered in the air, soft as breath. A child once taken had been returned, not to the world, not to the woods, but to memory, to where all things return when we forget them too long. The second woman slept, not in the way most people sleep, curled in dreams and breath and warmth, but in a deeper, older sleep, the kind found at the bottom of oceans or beneath the foundations of forgotten towns, the kind the house permitted only when it was ready to release something. Maeve sat beside her in the spiral chamber, legs folded, eyes fixed on the dark pool. Its surface was flat now, utterly still, a mirror not of glass, but of intention. It did not show the reflection of the room. It showed only what waited inside a person once everything else was stripped away. And in that pool, Maeve saw herself again, but not the fractured self she'd grown used to. The woman burdened by the name Maeve, keeper of keys, dream watcher, house scribe. This time she saw Ares, the girl, hair tangled with leaves, eyes the color of rotted wood, feet bleeding on pine needles as she walked the spiral for the first time. And beside her, hand in hand, another girl, twin not in blood but in fate, The one she had left behind. The one the house had never chosen. Until now, upstairs, the pines moved without wind. The road was silent. The other woman, the one who had walked out into the gray morning, had not returned. Her footsteps had vanished before the trees, and the humming had ceased. The house was not angry, only adjusting. Another path had opened, and Maeve could feel it. She rose from the spiral chamber and walked back through the breathing corridors of the basement. Her hands slid along the damp walls, and beneath her fingertips, the house whispered. Not words, gestures, shivers, memories, promises. She reached the top stair and hesitated before stepping into the kitchen. The second woman remained asleep below, her dream spiraling backward into the soil of herself. The kitchen was warm. The fire had burned itself out again, and outside, the clouds thickened into a low, bone-colored fog. Not white, not gray. Bone. Maeve walked to the hearth. The photo on the mantel was gone, replaced by nothing, just empty space. The house had nothing more to show her. That was a warning. She stepped to the hallway and paused before a mirror, the tall one at the end, framed in black wood, veined with age. It did not reflect her, not at first. Instead, it showed a door, a pale wooden door with no knob, painted over with black spirals. And slowly, in the center of the door, something bloomed. A knot, no, an eye, human, bloodshot, staring inward. The mirror whispered, not with voice, but with a pressure behind the ears. Find it. Maeve reached out, touched the glass, and fell through. She did not land. She stood in a hallway that bent upward, then downward, like a ribbon curling in wind. No gravity here. No sense of forward. Only inward. Every step was into herself. Every breath tasted of moss and parchment and teeth. The door appeared slowly. One spiral, then another, then 100, until it stood before her again, pale, knobless, sealed. But it pulsed. It wanted her. And the moment she pressed her hand to the center of the spiral, the eye opened, and she remembered the cabin. Not this one. The first, built from the ribs of something too old to name. Its fireplace lit with hair and antler and salt. Its first keeper, a child with no mouth, who wept spirals into the floor, and the choice she had made, not to stay, but to hide herself. The house had not chosen Maeve. Maeve had chosen the house. She had walked into the spiral before it knew her. She had built it from her forgetting. This place was her mind, her soul, her guilt, her lineage, and the spiral was not a symbol. It was a cage, a compass, a prayer, a mouth, and it had finally spoken back. Maeve opened the door, and on the other side, she saw every version of herself, standing in silence. 1,000 women, some laughing, some broken, some burned, some crowned, all of them waiting. One stepped forward, the red-cloaked one, the last. Her lips moved, but her voice was not a whisper. It was a bell. You are not the keeper. Maeve shuddered. You are the house. The mirrors behind her shattered. The hallway folded, and the world went black. Maeve, or Aries, or the echo of whoever she had once been, opened her eyes. She stood in the kitchen again. Firelight danced softly against the floorboards, though the hearth was empty. The table was set for one. A single cup of tea steamed gently, untouched. Outside, the bone-colored fog pressed against the windows like a curious animal. Time had softened, maybe collapsed. She did not know how long she had been gone, or where she had gone, only that she had returned changed, not just in her bones, but in the house itself. She felt its breath in her chest now. Every creak of wood beneath her feet was her ankle flexing. Every sigh of wind through the chimney was her breath returning to her lips. The spiral behind her ribs no longer turned. It waited. The woman from below still slept. She had not stirred in hours, maybe days. Maeve could no longer feel her thoughts the way she once had. The connection was dimming, fading, because the house no longer needed her. It had a new shape now, a new center, and she was it. She moved through the rooms slowly. The mirrors no longer showed her reflection. They turned away from her as she passed. The photographs on the wall had all gone blank, every face erased. Only the spirals remained, scrawled in charcoal and ash and nail scratch. They covered the walls like ivy now, moving when she wasn't looking, whispering through the seams of the wood. She reached the front door, placed her hand on the knob, and paused. Something was out there. Not a traveler, not a child, something older. The humming had returned, but it no longer came from the road. It came from inside her, low and patient and so very cold. She opened the door. A single figure stood at the edge of the clearing, not walking, not approaching, waiting. It wore no face, only a veil. Its arms were too long, and one of its feet was buried in the earth like a root. It raised one hand, slowly, and pointed past her, into the house. She knew what it meant. She stepped aside. It did not move. Not yet. It was not for her welcome. The spiral had to choose. She closed the door, sat in her chair, watched the fireless hearth, listened down the hallway. A door creaked open on its own. The scent of jasmine and rotting cedar crept out. And then, footsteps. Small, not the boy. Another child. Another memory the house had forgotten to erase. The little girl stepped into the kitchen. Maybe 7, maybe 8, eyes wide, barefoot. She did not look surprised to see Maeve. She said nothing, just approached the empty teacup, sat down, held the cup between her palms like something precious, and whispered, "Do you remember me?" Maeve felt her heart shatter, not break, shatter, because she did. It was her, Aries, the one who'd first entered the spiral, the original, not a memory, not a ghost, but a seed the house had planted and buried. All this time, she had been watching herself sleep, living a story told to her by wood and shadow and root. And now, the story had looped. The spiral had returned to its origin. The girl looked up at her, smiled, and said, "It's time to let me out." The fire lit itself, not with flame, but with light, pale gold, the color of memory. The spiral inside Maeve's chest unraveled like a ribbon in wind, and the house sighed, not with relief, but with grief. Outside, the faceless figure stepped forward, 1 foot, then another. The ground cracked beneath it, its veil lifted in the wind. But Maeve did not look. She was watching the girl, and the girl was standing now, walking toward her, hand extended, palm to palm, spiral to spiral. The house around them began to shake. "I was never supposed to stay," the girl said. Maeve nodded. "I know." The girl took her hand, and the world went white. When the white passed, there was nothing. No floor beneath her, no ceiling above. Maeve floated in a place that was not sky, nor void, nor dream. Just softness, like being wrapped in a thought too old to think again. Her body had no shape, only memory. And even that was unraveling, piece by piece. She no longer felt the spiral behind her ribs, because it was no longer behind her. It was all around her, turning slowly, not as a trap, not as a symbol, as a language, and she could read it now. The girl, Aries, drifted beside her, no longer small, no longer a child. She was becoming something else, blooming into the space around them, not aging, not growing, remembering herself back together. Her voice spoke in every direction, echoing from Maeve's breath and from the hollow spaces of the house that had once held them both. "You built it to forget." Maeve didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth curled around her like smoke, tightening gently. The house had never called her. She had made the first house herself. Long ago, not in the woods, but in her mind, to seal the memory away, to hide the moment she became two people, one who stayed, one who walked away, a child who could not bear what had happened, a child who opened the wrong door. And when that door opened, it didn't let something in, it let something out, and that thing became the spiral. The whiteness around her flickered. For a moment, she stood in the first cabin again, before the pines grew thick, before the paths crumbled to fog. She was small, bleeding from the soles of her feet, her mouth sewn shut with red thread. The woman in red, the last Maeve, stood across the room, reaching out, but the child stepped forward instead, her eyes full of quiet fire. She reached into Maeve's chest, not cruelly, gently, and removed the spiral. Maeve gasped. She felt herself collapse inward, the walls of the house folding like skin after a deep wound has closed. Not pain, relief, all around her. She could hear the voices of every woman the house had held, not screaming, not mourning, but singing in that strange, soft language of the spiral, a hymn for endings. And the girl, Aries, placed the spiral in her own chest again, where it had always belonged, where it had waited, and said, "I forgive you." The house shuddered. Once, twice, then was still. Maeve opened her eyes. She was standing alone at the edge of the forest. No cabin behind her, no road beneath her feet, only pine needles and silence. She looked down. She wore no red cloak, no spirals on her skin, no memories weighing down her bones, only a name, one she had never spoken aloud. Aries. And this time, it felt like hers again. Somewhere, deep beneath the earth where memory pools and whispers fester, the spiral turned one last time, then fell still. The house no longer hummed, because there was no house, only the forest, and somewhere beyond its edge, a child stepping into the sun.